Okay, folks. So next in line is going to be the second part of this. Let me put it on myself a little bit here. So next in line is going to be the second part of this. We finished the value studies. We finished the transitional studies on the left-hand side. We've gone with the color wheel. And inside that color wheel, we've actually dealt with the neutrals with yellow ochre, raw sienna, or burnt sienna, and raw umber. All right. So next, we're going to be basically doing what's considered a point line plane composition. Don't let this part of it, kind of knock you. It's not difficult at all to create a composition. So think of like shapes, three simple shapes. They can be a little more complex if you want them to be, but I'm thinking simple shapes such as squares, triangles, circles, rectangles, so on and so forth. Complex shapes would be more amorphous shapes. Think of an amoeba, the outside outline of a tree or something like that. Those would be more organic or amorphous shapes. All right. You can choose whichever one you want. If you want it to be more simple shapes, then so be it. If you want to be more complex, then you're going to be doing a little more work with trying to create the borders and all that, but not a problem. Either way is fine. Either one is fine. But I'm going to go ahead and just make real simple shapes. So in thinking of it, think of a large, medium, and small. All right. Large shape, not all the shapes have to fit inside the borders. All right. If I'm making a circle, I can make a circle inside the space, or I can think of a circle that's as big as this entire board and just say that part of that circle is actually just being shown in my composition. So that's how I'm actually going to start it. I'm going to start with a circle. Let's think of a circle about as big as this here, and I'm just going to kind of continue a curved line. And hopefully everybody can see that. So I'm continuing a curved line with the idea that that circle is much larger. All right, so that will be a very large shape. Your medium shape is going to be a shape that does fit inside the space, but it's going to seem or appear large inside the space, compared to the smaller shape. All right, so let's say I'm going to create let's say just a rectangle. All right. Okay, all right, so you can kind of see I've created a rectangle here. And then the last one, let's say I'm going to create let's say a triangle. Let's say I'm going to make a bit of a longer triangle. It's going to be the smallest shape that I have. All right, so real simple. So I have what will be considered a smaller shape, a larger or a mid shape, and then a larger shape. All right. Now what that does, anytime that you actually create any shape on a space, it doesn't just create that one shape, it also creates other spaces or other shapes. All right. So even though I'm thinking of this as being a large circle, this being a medium rectangle, and this being a smaller triangle, I'm still creating the spaces around that have to be dealt with as well. So all of these spaces are going to be dealt with inside the actual painting. All right, so once we have that composition up, we're going to go ahead and start the process of painting. We're going to be creating your primary colors, your secondary colors, your intermediate and tertiary colors if need be, but also tints and shades. So what we're going to do is, if you have already purchased all of your brushes, over years I have quite a few, then I'm going to be using my flat brush. All right, I have two flats here, a larger and a smaller flat. I'm going to be using my bright brush. Bright brush looks very similar to your flat brush, with the exception that the bristles are shorter on the bright brush. I'm going to be using my filbert, and if you look at the filbert, the top of the filbert is rounded where it has the same kind of ferrule, which is the metal part of it, very similar to the flat and the bright. And then I'm going to be using my round brush. My round brush is a rounded ferrule, all right, with a brush that has a fuller body and a smaller toe at the top. Okay, so that's my round brush. So I'm gonna be using these brushes for the process here. And basically, within the rules of the assignment, what we're looking at is we're trying to have borders have to where the areas where the borders meet. All right, so the border is going to be color fields that meet. So what we've done is we've created color fields. Color fields are just areas of space that basically you're going to be adding or applying paint to. That's going to be your color field. And in those color fields, you must compose them in such a way that they include complementary bordering colors, analogous bordering colors, contrasting bordering colors, and we're going to be using some brush techniques. All right, so we have to use all of your primary, secondary, and primary and secondary colors. All right, so all of those have to be used. So we have to have at least 6 spaces. All right, so I'm going to have more than 6. So I have 1 space, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm saying I had more. I have 6 exactly. So I have it to where the shapes do overlap enough to where I'm creating 6 spaces. So I have 1 where the circle was, 1 where the rectangle crosses over the circle, that's 2, 3 for the rectangle outside of the circle, 4 where the triangle intersects the rectangle, 5 where the triangle is outside of that, and then 6 is the large space that would be kind of considered a background. All right, so I'm going to be choosing an area, and I'm just going to load my brush with a flat brush and begin painting. And I'm just going to use the very deep red here for that large circle area. And with your brush strokes, this is one where I'm going to basically use very broad, simple brush strokes. I'm not going to try to make the brush strokes very smooth at all. I'm just going to be applying the pigment. I'm not going to worry that much about the borders right now, because with acrylic paint, you'll see that the paint dries fairly quickly. And if I do want to go over a border in order to clean it up, I can just wait until that paint dries and then just clean the border up. And what I mean by cleaning the border up, make the border more exact, more clean. All right. All right. So real simple. Just creating a large field. Okay. So a couple of things that we also have to do. We're going to be making transitions. All right. And those transitions are going to basically be where you go from one color to another color within the same space. So since I have the red right here, I'm going to transition that red into an orange at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to transition that red to an orange. Okay, in order to do so, I don't have to clean my brush off. All right, so I can still have some of the red that was on there when I applied the paint. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to load my brush with some yellow. And I'm going to literally, and since this is an area where I'm not trying to paint out brush strokes, then I'm going to basically just apply very heavy brush strokes to my surface here. And one of the things that you do have that you can do is to add tint and shade as well. So what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to paint these large brush strokes here. You can see that it's covering up a lot of space really quick. And I'm just going to take some white, all right, and tint the area down at the bottom to make it look even more brilliant. All right, so we're going to take the white, and I'm just going to start adding some of that white down at the bottom. So we're mixing very broad brush strokes, and I'm just going to make a transition from the top to the bottom here. All right, real simple, not really being major. So this is just, and those brush strokes that we had on the other side where we're painting the X's, all right, kind of creates that idea of those, the same concept of creating the X's here. All right, so just created a really, really large transition from the red down to red being primary, down to the yellow, orange being a secondary color. All right, so with the assignment sheet, all you have to do is, I mean, once you get one of those problems accomplished, you can actually just cross that one out and then move to the next one. So it says basically we want transitions. So now I have a transition from a primary to a secondary color. So I no longer have to worry about that. All right, so now I'm going to find an area where I can begin to make some connections with this red and red orange. All right, so on my assignment sheet, I have to have bordering colors that are complementary, a bordering color that is analogous, and then a bordering color that has some sense of a change in value. Okay, so what I'm going to do, here's where I come up to the top here and I look at red. Red is the opposite or the complement of green. So what I'm going to do in this space is I'm going to create a green in this space. Okay, and I'm going to basically look at how I can create a green here and then accomplish another border and another one of the guidelines on the on our guide sheet. Since we also have to have a one color in its complement bordering, we also have to have a color and a change in value bordering as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with green here, since green is the complement of red, and then once I hit that border, I'm going to change the value of that green into another green, but it's just going to be a different value of that green, either a darker value or a lighter value of that green. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the area here. I'm just going to be mixing. I mean, if you have green, if you've already bought it, I'm completely fine with you using it at this point. If you don't have green and orange and violet, then you still can go ahead and mix those colors. I'm going to mix my colors on the surface of the support. All right, this makes it a little bit easier to basically adjust the colors as you go. If you mix them on there, once I mix them on my palette, the color might change, because it's going to be relative. Color is relative, so it might change when I get to the support here. So I'm just going to basically mix my colors on the surface here. I'm not really going to worry too much about the borders too much, as I said before, because I can literally just go and make a really clean border with my flat brush here. All right, so blue and yellow make green, so I'm going to load my yellow here. I'm going to basically create a green in that space by mixing those two colors. And in fact, I'm not going to stop at that border. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint the entire area here with that green, just to show the transition, not so much the transition, I'm sorry, just to show how to kind of make a new border or create a border change in value. All right, so I'm not going to worry about how clean my brush strokes are down here, because as I said, I can basically go back in and change those or clean those borders up. All right, so what I'm looking at right now is this area. I have a very deep, kind of almost like a blue-green in the rectangular space here. So now I'm going to make a change in value, and value being relative lightness or darkness. So I'm going to make a change in the value on that border to create a value border change, all right, for lack of better words. So right where we had the area where we're looking at the two spots here, all right, where that circle goes in and makes a very distinct sort of border. Right now it looks like the rectangle is sitting on top of the circle, all right. We're wanting to look as if the rectangle has intersected the circle as opposed to being on top. So I have a choice to make. I can either make this area that's in the circle a bit darker, or I can make that a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do, since I already made a lighter value down at the bottom here, and I'm going to make a very strong sort of value change, I'm going to go ahead and create a shade of green as the border change. All right, so one thing we have to learn is that whenever we have lights and darks, the reason something is light is because it's relative to something that is dark. The reason we have something that's dark is because it's relative to something that is light. Nothing is either light or dark by itself. It is either lighter or darker based upon what's next to it and how we actually will compare two areas or two colors or two values. The reason we're seeing one as being darker or lighter is because we're comparing it to another value or another color. All right. So we have a little bit of what looks to be a little bit of a transition there, almost as if the green is translucent. We can kind of almost feel like we're looking through the red or through the green to see the red underneath. That is just due to the change in value. All right. And then what I'm also going to do, since we can make that even more kind of pronounced, all right, that change pronounced, then I'm going to grab a little bit of my white and I'm just going to apply it to that border. I'm going to mix it in. The pigment dries sort of fast, so I'm going to mix that in with a little bit of the green there at that border. So if I put a tint and a shade next to each other, then I'm really going to see a major change in the value. Okay, all right, so we have that there. So at this point, I now have an orange down at the bottom, a green, and a red. So I've already accomplished two of my secondary colors, one of my primary colors. I do need to create my other primaries, my other secondaries, so on and so forth. So I have this little part of a triangle here that is in the green. I'm just going to go ahead and load my yellow directly into that space. And I'm not going to do anything to that yellow because I do need a primary color that is going to be seen by itself as well. All right, so I'm going to just use that as that spot. And from there, all right, next thing I'm going to do, we also need blue. All right, so once we have blue, then we'll have all three of our primary colors, and the only thing that we'll need is a violet after that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in blue as sort of my background color. I may go in and make a transition at some point. You really see how once you start kind of filling these spaces in, that you'll start kind of seeing how these borders react to each other and how colors react to each other. All right. You can see how really clean you can make a border just by putting two colors next to each other. Do not worry about attempting to butt two areas next to each other. Just paint, and then when you put the next color in, you'll see that that new color can butt up against another color. So I need a transition here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a lighter blue, all right, a tint of blue up top. And I'm leaving that space open because since I know that I need one more secondary color, then I'm going to just hold off for that remainder of the triangle and use that as a violet. All right, so that's going to be a violet in that space. All right. And as you see, this is real simple. There's no, like major production to kind of create this point line plane composition. Very simple. If you want it to be more complex, by all means, you have that right. I'm completely fine with that. But it's not completely necessary to get all of the instructions and all of the different, I guess you would say, transitions and all of the different bordering colors. Not that difficult to create those bordering colors, not that difficult to create the transitions. You won't need a lot of different colors, a lot of different sort of plays and all of that. You really just need to kind of figure out where you want your colors to exist and how you want them to interact with each other. So right now I'm basically just painting a violet in this space here. Let's see. Okay. Mine is a bit darker than I really want it to be. So I'm gonna just kind of play around with a little bit more light, a little bit more tint in the blue to really push that to be a bit more of a transition or a stronger contrast here. Still in the blue family, most definitely. So we have a tint of blue. I'm just wanting it to be a little bit deeper here. A little bit stronger transition from your light to your darker value of blue. And like I said, I'm not worried so much about your brush strokes on this one because I won't really be able to tell when grading whether you've sort of accomplished all the different brush strokes. So I'm not going to worry too much about them at all on this. We'll concern ourselves with those on the next assignment, and I'll be able to tell much more on that next assignment whether things have been done correctly based upon brush strokes. All right. Now, if you want to, after a certain amount of time, if you want to kind of play with it a little bit more and create more transitions and all of that, completely fine. I have no problem with that at all. But the things that we're looking for, all right, things that are going to be basically within the assignment, you have to have all three of your primary colors. You have to have all three of your secondary colors. So in this, I have red, I have blue, and I have yellow. Those are my primary colors. Secondary colors, the red transitioned into an orange. So I have an orange at the bottom. I also have a green, and then I have a violet. All right, so those are going to be basically your secondary colors. The transitions that we have to have a transition in from a color to a tint. We also have to have a transition from a color to to an analogous color. So within this, I have a transition, tint and shade transition. So we have a transition from a lighter value blue down into a darker value. That's basically a tint shade transition. Then we also have a transition from one color to another color. The red is transitioning into the orange. All right, so those things are there as well. For the borders, we have to have two borders I mean, two colors touching each other that are complements. So I have the green here that is bordering next to a red. All right. I have also a yellow that is bordering a purple. We also have to have colors that are bordering each other based upon value. All right. So what I did in here with the rectangle is I shaded the green here next to a tint of that green. So a border of shade and tint. Those are values. So we have that. And then we also have to have colors that are analogous. So colors that are close to each other, bordering each other. All right. I have that in actually the yellow next to the green, but also the blue next to the green, as well as the red, I mean, kind of in the context of orange as well. All right. So we're covering all of those bases. Everything has been covered and all of that. Real simple. Like I said, don't make this anything that's going to be, I mean, sort of racking your brain too much. This is a simple process on putting borders together and sort of creating a sense of a simple composition. All right, very simple composition. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and post these, and hopefully everybody will sort of have a little bit of fun on this one as opposed to the others where a little more work and a little more direction. Okay. All right. Thanks y'all so much.